Once upon a time, there was a boy named Liam. Liam was born into a very, very rich family. His house was so big that people would say it looked like a palace. The floor has beautiful tiles, the walls were covered with fancy paintings, and there were gardens with flowers from all over the world. He had more toys than he could ever play with, clothes that were soft and expensive, and food that was made by the best cooks in town. But even though Liam had everything he could ever want, there was one thing he didn't have: love. Liam's parents were always busy. His father owned a huge business, always working, talking on the phone, or flying to faraway places. His mother was always at big parties, smiling and talking to other rich people. They never had time for Liam. They didn't play with him, read him bedtime stories, or even tuck him in at night. Instead, nannies and housekeepers took care of him. One day, when Liam was just a young boy, his parents went on a trip. They flew in a big, shiny plane, but something terrible happened. The plane crashed, and his parents didn't come back. Liam was left all alone in his big, empty house. It felt colder and quieter than ever. Many people came to visit, but they weren't there for Liam. They were there because of his money. They pretended to care, but Liam could tell they were only interested in his wealth. No one loved him for who he was. Years passed, and Liam grew up, managing all the money his parents had left him. He became a billionaire, even richer than his parents. He had big, fancy cars, a giant house, and many people working for him. But none of it made him happy. Inside, he felt lonely and empty. He longed for real happiness, for someone who would love him, not his money. One day, Liam decided to do something strange. He wanted to find people who would care for him without knowing he was rich. So he made a plan. He would dress up like a poor man, with old clothes and dirty shoes. He would leave his mansion and live on the streets, asking for food and shelter. He wanted to see if there were people out there who would be kind to him just because they had good hearts. And so, with only a small bag and a small money in his pocket, Liam left his mansion. He wore old, worn-out clothes and a ragged hat. He walked through the city, asking people for food. But most people turned him away. Some laughed at him, some ignored him, and some even yelled at him. A few people threw water at him, and some called him names. But he kept going, hoping he would find someone who would show him kindness. After days of wandering, Liam found himself in a small village. The village was not fancy like the city. The houses were small and simple, the streets were dusty, and the people looked like they worked very hard to earn their living. While he was walking down a quiet road, he saw a woman sitting by the side of the street with two children beside her. The woman looked tired and weak, and her clothes were old and torn. The children, twin boys, looked around 10 years old. Even though they were poor, their eyes sparkled with hope. The woman was holding out her hand, begging people for food. Liam could see that she was hungry and that the children were too. Something inside him felt warm and sad at the same time. He walked over to her and said softly, "I'm hungry and I have nowhere to go. Can you help me?" The woman looked up at him with gentle eyes. She was surprised but kind. She nodded and said, "We don't have much, but we'll share what we have." She reached into a small bag and took out a piece of bread, breaking it into small pieces. She gave some to Liam, some to each of her sons, and kept only a tiny piece for herself. The bread was dry and hard, but to Liam, it tasted better than any fancy food he'd ever had. After they finished eating, the woman invited Liam to her home. It was a tiny house with only one room. Inside, there was an old bed, a few pots, and some blankets on the floor. The twin boys gave Liam one of their blankets and told him he could sleep beside them. That night, as they lay on the floor, Liam felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A feeling of warmth and love. The next morning, Liam learned more about the woman and her children. Her name was Amina, and her sons were named Kola and Kunal. She told him her story, and Liam listened carefully. Amina's husband had passed away when the boys were just 2 years old. Back then they had a small farm where they grew cassava, a root they could eat and sell. But after her husband died, his family took the farm away from her, leaving her with nothing. She tried to find work, washing dishes in a small restaurant, but even that job was taken away when someone wrongly accused her of stealing. Now, with no job and no farm, Amina had no choice but to beg on the streets to feed her children. She told Liam that her health was getting worse and that she couldn't afford medicine. But despite everything, she loved her boys with all her heart and would do anything to keep them safe and fed. Liam felt a wave of sadness and anger. How could life be so unfair to someone so kind? He decided he would help Amina and her sons. But he didn't tell her who he really was. Instead, every morning, he went out and came back with a little money, which he used to buy food and small things they needed. When Amina asked where he got the money, he told her he found small jobs on nearby farms. In truth, he was using a little of his hidden money, but he didn't want her to know. He wanted to be part of their simple life, not just a rich man giving them charity. Over time, Amina and the boys started to treat Liam like family. Amina called him her son, and the boys called him their big brother. She would stay up at night, covering him and the boys with blankets, whispering prayers for God to protect them. She would say, "Dear God, please protect my 3 children and keep them safe." Liam's heart swelled with happiness every time he heard her say that. One day, a mean-looking man came to their little house. He was Amina's late husband's brother, the man who had taken the farm from her. He was angry and said he was going to sell the house they were living in. Liam was shocked. How could anyone be so cruel to a poor, struggling woman and her children? Liam stood up and faced the man. "You can't take this house," he shouted. "These children need a place to live." The man didn't care. He called the police and told them that Liam had threatened him. The police arrived, and even though Liam tried to explain, they took him away and locked him up in a small cell. Amina and her boys were heartbroken. They went to the police station, begging the officers to let Liam go. Amina cried, saying, "Please, he is my son. He's done nothing wrong. Please let him go." The officers didn't listen, and Amina fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Liam couldn't bear to see her in so much pain, so he decided to tell the truth. He revealed his real name and showed the police his ID. He told them he was the actual owner of the CREYK Big Oil Company, that he was only pretending to be poor to find real happiness. The officers were shocked and quickly let him go. When he walked out, Amina and the boys were waiting for him outside. They looked at him with tearful eyes, and he hugged them tightly. He explained why he had come to live with them and how their kindness and love had healed the loneliness in his heart. That night, Liam took Amina and the boys back to his mansion. They were amazed by the giant house with golden lights, beautiful gardens, and sparkling floors. The boys' eyes were wide with wonder, and Amina could hardly believe it was real. Liam didn't stop there. He flew Amina to a special hospital in another country so she could get the best treatment for her health. She finally received the care she needed, and she began to feel stronger and healthier. While she was away, Liam enrolled Kola and Kunal in a big, beautiful school where they could learn and play. He made sure they had everything they needed, from school supplies to new clothes and even a place to play. But Liam knew there was more to do. He couldn't forget the mean man who had tried to take everything from Amina. So, he went to court and sued the man for taking away all the properties from Amina and her children, leaving them to suffer with nothing to survive with. After a long fight, he won. The court asked him to return back all the properties and never to lay his foot around them, or he will be arrested for trespassing. Liam built a beautiful, cozy house on the land and made sure Amina and the boys could live there happily. Liam didn't just help Amina and her boys. He also started helping other people in the village. He set up programs so families would have enough food, clean water, and schools. The village began to change, becoming a place filled with hope and happiness. People loved and respected Liam because of his kindness and generosity. Amina, Kola, and Kunal became his family. He would often visit them, playing games with the boys and helping Amina on the farm. Together, they would laugh, eat, and enjoy simple moments. Liam felt happier than he had ever been, not because of his wealth, but because he was surrounded by people who truly loved him. And so, Liam found the real happiness he had always been searching for. He learned that love, kindness, and family were worth more than all the money in the world. He had finally found his true home, not in a mansion, but in the hearts of people who loved him for who he was. And they all lived happily ever after, surrounded by love and joy.